Trump invaded Venezuela. The media says it's about democracy, about Maduro, about human rights. Some say it's about oil. Others talk about freedom. But the truth is different. Venezuelan oil? Yes, Venezuela has the largest reserves in the world, but that oil is heavy, expensive to refine, and the world is already migrating to a different energy matrix. So no, it's not about oil. It's about something far more valuable, something that will determine who controls the global economy over the next 50 years. And China already has its hands deep in the game. Today you're going to understand the real geopolitical game behind Venezuela, and you'll realize this story began long before Trump, long before Maduro, and goes far beyond South America. Stay with me. Let's start by dismantling the most obvious narrative. When Trump announces a military operation in Venezuela, everyone rushes to the same tired explanation: oil. It makes sense, right? Venezuela has 300 billion barrels in proven reserves, the largest reserve on the planet, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, more than Iraq. But there's a detail no one tells you. That Venezuelan oil is garbage. Seriously, it's heavy, extra heavy crude, full of sulfur, that requires specialized refineries to become usable fuel. The cost of extraction and refining is extremely high. While the Saudis pull light crude out of the ground almost for free, Venezuela has to invest heavily in every single barrel. To give you an idea, the production cost of a barrel of light oil in the Persian Gulf is around $10. In Venezuela, it can reach $30 or $40 depending on the field, and that's when the infrastructure is actually working, which it isn't after years of underinvestment and sanctions. And there's more. The world is moving away from oil. Electric vehicles, solar energy, energy transition. Norway has already banned the sale of combustion engine cars starting in 2030. The European Union is heading in the same direction. China is electrifying everything. Oil as a strategic asset is in terminal decline. It may still last 3 or 4 decades as an important commodity, but as a pillar of global power, it's over. The oil companies themselves know this. Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, all of them are diversifying into renewables. Slowly, somewhat reluctantly, but they are, because the game has changed. So would Trump risk a military invasion, tension with European allies, an international diplomatic crisis, and a possible armed conflict for a declining asset? I don't think so. The second narrative is democracy and human rights. Maduro is a dictator, represses the people. The humanitarian situation is terrible. 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. A destroyed economy, hyperinflation, hunger. All true. But since when do the United States invade countries out of democratic altruism? Have you seen American military intervention in Turkmenistan, in Eritrea, in Azerbaijan? Brutal dictatorships, zero democracy, mass repression, and no Marines landing there. Why? Because there's no strategic interest. Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, executes dissidents, has no elections, and is the United States' best ally in the Middle East. Egypt? Military dictatorship. Ally. Kazakhstan? Total authoritarianism. Trade partner. Geopolitics doesn't operate based on moral values. It operates based on interests, and the interest in Venezuela goes far beyond oil. It's about control over the economy of the future. Think with me, what is the foundation of the modern economy? Oil and the dollar. Since the Bretton Woods agreements and later the petrodollar system, whoever controls energy and currency controls the game. The United States dominated the 20th century precisely because of this. The dollar as the global reserve currency, oil as the essential commodity, and the two tied together in a strategic knot. Nixon sealed the deal with the Saudis in the 70s. Simple and brilliant. Saudi Arabia sells oil only in dollars. The United States guarantees military security to the kingdom. Suddenly, every country in the world needs dollars to buy energy. Artificial and permanent demand for the American currency. Hegemony guaranteed. But the economy that's arriving no longer works like that. The 21st century economy is an economy of metals. Lithium for batteries, copper for electrical infrastructure, silver for solar panels and electronics, rare earths for wind turbines, smartphones, defense systems, graphite, nickel, cobalt, the list goes on. And I'm not talking about small quantities. An electric vehicle needs 60 kilograms of copper. 60. A combustion car uses 23 kilograms, almost 2 times less. A solar panel uses 20 grams of silver per unit. It doesn't seem like much, but multiply that by billions of panels. A wind turbine? 200 kilograms of rare earths, each. And the world is planning billions of electric vehicles, trillions in renewable energy, data centers consuming copper as if there was no tomorrow, 5G networks requiring rare earths, energy storage batteries demanding lithium in astronomical volumes. The International Energy Agency has already calculated it. To meet global climate targets, demand for lithium will increase 40 times by 2040. 40 times. Graphite, 30 times. Cobalt, 20 times. Rare earths, 7 times. Whoever controls these metals controls the economy that's coming. And guess who realized this 15 years ago? China. While the West was still obsessed with oil and wars in the Middle East, China was quietly buying mines, making trade deals, building refineries, and dominating the entire strategic metals processing chain. Not with war, with patient investment and long-term planning. China's strategy was brilliant. They didn't just buy mines, they bought knowledge. They built the entire refining chain. They developed processing technology. Let's look at the strategic map. China can't simply invade South America. That would be direct war with the United States, a total breakdown of international order, global economic collapse. Only the US can openly invade another country. The Monroe Doctrine still exists, even if no one talks about it openly anymore. The Western Hemisphere is America's backyard. It always has been. So China plays the long game. Loans, infrastructure, trade agreements, direct investment, what they call win-win diplomacy, but in practice is silent strategic penetration. Venezuela owed more than $60 billion to China in 2024. $60 billion. How did that happen? Simple. Chavez and later Maduro needed money to keep the regime running. Western banks wouldn't lend. The IMF demanded structural reforms they didn't want to implement, so China came in with easy money. No political conditionalities, no demands for democracy or human rights. In exchange, China built ports, railways, energy infrastructure. The port of La Guaira expanded with Chinese money, railways connecting the interior of the country to the coast, modernized refineries, and it started buying assets, gold mines, mineral reserves, exploration concessions that will last for decades. The pattern is always the same. A country in trouble receives generous Chinese loans. The country can't repay. China accepts natural resources as payment. Suddenly, strategic mines are under the control of Chinese state-owned companies. That's what they call the debt trap, and it works. But the game wasn't just Venezuela. It was using Venezuela as a base to penetrate the entire Andean region. Look at the geography. Venezuela borders Colombia. Colombia connects to Ecuador and Peru. Peru connects to Bolivia and Chile. Suddenly, you have a corridor running from the Caribbean coast to the Strait of Magellan, a continuous axis of influence passing exactly through the richest strategic metal regions on the planet. And along that corridor lies the planet's energy future. China already controls 60% of copper production in this region. Chinese companies operate massive mines in Peru. MMG Limited, controlled by a Chinese state-owned company, operates the Las Bambas mine in Peru. Zijin Mining bought majority stakes in projects in Ecuador. In Chile, Chinese companies are major shareholders in several operations, and they were expanding aggressively. Here's a crucial detail you didn't see in the media. In January of 25, China imposed unofficial restrictions on silver exports, a shadow ban. Officially, there is no prohibition, no decree, no law, no announcement. In practice, Chinese silver stopped leaving the country. Export licenses silently denied, endless bureaucratic delays, inexplicable logistical holdups. Why? Because domestic demand exploded. Solar panels, electronics, electric vehicles. China installed more solar panels in 2024 than the rest of the world combined. Every panel needs silver. China is consuming silver on an industrial scale and realized that selling this metal to the West is a strategic mistake. And this reveals the full move. China wants to migrate the global economy from a dollar oil base to a commodities metals base, because in that economy, China is already in command. 90% of critical metal processing passes through Chinese refineries. That's not an exaggeration, 90%. You can have a lithium mine in Australia, but raw lithium needs to be processed into lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, what goes into the battery. And who does that processing? China. You can extract rare earths in the United States, but refining rare earths is a complex, polluting, expensive chemical process. Who dominates it? China. Even if the United States controls the mines, the country that turns raw ore into usable refined metal is China. Control over processing is control over the entire chain, and China built this control methodically over 20 years while the West slept. Now you understand why Trump acted. If China consolidates control over the Andes, the game is over. The United States becomes hostage to Beijing for any energy transition, any technological industry, any modern infrastructure. You can't build F-35s without rare earths. You can't build data centers without copper. You can't produce solar panels without silver. And if all of that depends on metals processed in China or extracted from regions under Chinese influence, Washington has lost the game. The invasion of Venezuela is not about Venezuela. It's about preventing China from completing the encirclement of the Andes. With military control over Venezuela, the United States can pressure Colombia, negotiate with Peru, create an operations base to monitor Chinese investments throughout the region. Suddenly, that strategic corridor running from the Caribbean to Patagonia falls under American supervision. The United States doesn't need to control 100% of strategic metals. It needs to ensure that China doesn't control them. That's strategic deterrence by denial. And here's where it gets interesting. The European Union is in the same boat. Europe needs these metals for the energy transition, but depends entirely on China for processing. Berlin and Paris know they're hostages, so even with all the diplomatic rhetoric against American interventionism, deep down, Europe wants the United States to do the dirty work of containing Chinese expansion in South America. It's geopolitical hypocrisy at its finest. But there are nuances. It's not black and white. China is not an evil imperial villain trying to dominate the world. China is playing the game in the smartest possible way. It invested early, planned long-term, built real competitive advantages. It's strategic state capitalism working. The United States is also not a heroic defender of the liberal order. It's an empire, in relative decline, trying to maintain hegemony through military force and economic pressure. And Latin America? It remains the chessboard where others play. Okay, but how does this affect your life? Directly. The price of electronics, the cost of electric vehicles, your electricity bill, and so on. All of this depends on the availability and price of these strategic metals. If the Sino-American dispute over the Andes escalates, you'll see artificial scarcity, inflated prices, disrupted supply chains. Expect component prices to explode if China further restricts exports of processed rare earths. But there are also opportunities. Countries that manage to position themselves as alternative suppliers of strategic metals will prosper. Australia is investing heavily in lithium, Canada in rare earths, South Africa in platinum and group metals. The world is shifting from an economy based on fossil fuels to one based on metals and electrification, and whoever controls these metals will set the rules of the game for the next 50 years. The United States knows this, China knows this, Europe knows this, and now you do too. Leave a comment. Do you think the United States can contain Chinese expansion in South America, or has China already won this game? If you liked this analysis, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications.